In this video, we are going to learn how to paint a mouth. We'll be working on a small format to focus solely on the mouth and on the skin all around it. The drawing part is done using the grid technique, and if you want to practice, you have the model that you can download in the description. And if you want to go further, you have access to my entire painting courses available in the descriptions. Now, let's get started. Let's take a closer look at the colors of the mouth. We can already see that the upper lip is darker than the lower lip. On the upper lip, especially on the left sides, we start to see reddish tones that lean slightly toward purple and even brownish shades. In the central area, the tones are a bit lighter, still within the range of slightly purplish pinks. And on the lower lip, as I mentioned, we find lighter pinks, still with hints of purple or paleness, but with much lighter variations overall. In the central part of the lower lip, there is a very bright zone, a highlight that appears close to white. In that area, the pink becomes very pale. And as for the teeth themselves, we can see that in some spots they have slightly yellowish grays. And in the back, the teeth appear much darker since they catch far less light and are therefore deeper in value. So there you have it. Now let's take a look at how to mix these colors. Let's start now by mixing the lip colors. I'm beginning with the upper lip. You can notice that this upper lip has shades that are a bit more red and purplish compared to the lower lip. So that's what I am doing. I start with a base of red, to which I add a bit of ultramarine blue and also a little yellow, as you may have seen, since yellow is the complementary color of purple and helps to tone down the intensity a bit. I am also going to add a little bit of burnt umber because it helps to give it a slightly more neutral look and also softens the intensity. That's why I like this color. Now I have a shade that feels quite satisfying, and from this base I will create one version that's a bit darker and another that is a bit lighter, so I can work with different values. That will help me build texture and depth. And now we can move on to the lower lip. For this lower lip, the tones are a bit more pinkish and overall more vibrant than the upper part, less purplish, less muted. So that's the color I mix, and from this shade I'm going to create a slightly darker version since the first one I mixed was quite light and intended more for the central highlights area of this lower lip. With these colors, I would say that we have a pretty good base for the lips. I am adjusting this one just a little bit. Of course, we can always make changes along the way and create all the variations if needed, but for now, I think that we are in a good place. I will now start mixing the skin tones we will be using. We are working with fairly traditional beige shades, the kind we often find in skin colors, so I start with this slightly orangey tone mixed with a large amount of white. I also add a tiny bit of blue to my color to tone down the orange. Burnt umber also helps to make it less intense, a bit more neutral, a bit more brownish, like natural skin tones often are. And at this point I think that we have got a pretty good color. It is a little orangey, but there are areas of the skin where the tone will be more kind of pink and less orange. So that's why I added a good amount of red to my mixture. But then I realized the red was too intense, so I added its opposite color. But I overdid it, especially with the blue, so that's why I went back and added the opposite color of the blue, which is orange, still keeping a noticeable amount of red because this time I want to get slightly pinker tones. And now I would say we have some really solid initial colors, and with a large amount of white, as you can see, I create a much lighter version. And finally, there will be areas of the skin where the color is a bit more yellowish, yellow-orange really, so that's exactly what I did. I added a large amount of yellow to my mixture compared to the other colors. And with that, I would say that we are all set for the skin tones, and we can now move on to the colors of the teeth. Now let's move on to the colors of the teeth. What I do for the teeth is create a slightly yellowish color, because if you look at the front teeth they appear somewhat yellow, so that's what I did. I took some yellow and added a touch of its complementary color, the purple, just a small amount along with a bit of burnt umber to neutralize the mix. But these colors still need to be very light, so I added a large amount of white to my mixture to capture the brightness and lightness of the teeth. That's what I am doing here, and as you can see, I'm creating several variations of that base color. As for the teeth further in the back, on the other hand, those will need to have some more grayish tones, something clearly darker than the shades used for the front teeth. So I create these dark grays using burnt umber and ultramarine blue, and then we will be all set, we will be ready to start painting the mouth. So let's go, we are starting the painting and we'll begin with the upper lip. There's no particular reason why I'm starting with the upper lip other than the fact that when I paint something I generally prefer to work from top to bottom. This way there's less chance of accidentally smudging the paint with my hand. So I start by applying my colors, trying to be fairly precise, and you can see that on the lower part of the upper lip we find the darkest areas. And also as we move toward the left side is noticeably darker overall than the right side. And I am using a medium-sized brush here and I try to apply the paint carefully over the different color zones. I really aim to establish the dominant color for each area I am painting. In this case, I have placed my colors in the main zones first, and once they are in place I can start blending them together to create a smooth base. That gives me a clean foundation to work on later, where I can add more detail. And at this stage, I would say that I have a good base, my colors are well blended, so now I will start adding more precise touch. As you can see, I am switching to a finer brush and I am beginning to apply darker accents along the edge of the lip. You can really see that the lower part of the lip is quite a bit darker, so I try to place those darker areas carefully. I look at their shape, whether they form any specific patterns, and then I apply the color accordingly, starting with those deeper tones. And then I do the same thing on the right side. Even though this right side is a bit more in the light, there are still a few small tucked in touches we can add. As you can see, these aren't extremely precise elements. The details we add on the lip are more like small strokes placed here and there, which help create that lip texture and make it look realistic. At this point, I have moved on to a slightly lighter color for the other areas. Because I feel like I have added everything necessary in terms of the darker parts in that section. And finally, between those darker elements, I can now add some very small and much lighter touches. And it is this layering of different rosy values with slightly lighter and slightly darker strokes that helps me create volume in the lip. It not only builds the texture, but also brings out the tiny surface reliefs that are really visible and characteristic of this part of the face. Now I would say I'm done with the upper lip and we can move on to the lower lip. As we noticed earlier during the color analysis, this lip is a bit more pinkish and most importantly, it has quite a few areas that are lighter than the upper lip, so that's what I am focusing on. In the central area, I started by adding these lighter tones. Then as we move toward the sides, the color gradually becomes darker, so I adjust the color on my brush accordingly. When I apply the paint, I really try to stretch it out so that the blending between colors happens more precisely. This is especially important here because we are working on a smaller area, and the smaller the area, the more accurate the blending needs to be. So really stretching the paint properly is key. And I also try to be precise to avoid going over the tip area. But if you do go a bit over the line or make a small mistake, it's not the end of the world, it's always possible to fix it later. Now I feel that my color application is good, and as I apply my color I try to kind of do some sort of blending between because these colors I applied are really quite similar to one another. And so now I can go back to painting and added some detail. I am adding to add these darker elements, and we can see that under the lower lip these details are a bit more defined as lines, slightly curved lines on the left side, so make sure to pay attention to their direction. And in the central area we also have some smaller, more irregular features that are quite similar to the ones we added in the upper lip, so that's what I am focusing on now, trying to add these elements like here, these kind of irregular touches. By the way, when I had these detail elements, these small irregular touches, I don't overthink it. I just observe the color, the value, whether it's lighter or darker, and then I add it. I look at the shape, whether it's more like a line or more like a dot, and then I try to do the same thing without stressing too much about it. There's no point in overdoing it with these details, just a few well-placed touches are more than enough to get a good result with your lip texture. Now with this fine brush I can start adding a few very light touches to the center of the lip. You can see that there is a highlight that is really well defined. I can go ahead and add that in. I'm trying to be fairly precise with the marks I make. Now what we also notice is that there are some slightly lighter areas on the sides as well. I can start to indicate those, but they will be less bright than what I have just added here. So I adjust my color accordingly. Here I can also see that these detail elements take the form of slightly curved lines, which helps to bring out more depth and further enhance the work we did earlier on the texture and the fine curved lines in this area. And so I am adding a few with this brush, but I think I'm going to continue the detailing work using the sword brush because that brush is really very useful and very precise for drawing the small lines that we find in this area. Let's continue, and I am adding this final small details element, and then we'll move on to the teeth. As we saw during the color analysis, the teeth are far from pure white, and I will begin by applying small touches of color with this precise brush to start laying down a base tone. Here on this particular tooth, it's true that it's quite bright, so I think I can start by adding some color here and there using this tone, just applying small touches. Then we will refine it by adding slightly darker or lighter marks like what we can see in the reference image. You can clearly see that there are small touches, some a bit darker, others lighter, that will help give the tooth a three-dimensional appearance. In the meantime, what I can also do is clearly define the edge of the tooth by working precisely around it in the gum area, adding a slight pinkish tone like this. That's what I am applying with this fine brush. I really try to be precise so I don't spill over onto the tooth. And I try to blend it just slightly, very gently with it. I just want my two colors to barely touch together and barely blend into each other. And here between these two teeth, we can see that it starts out fairly pink, then gradually blends into the teeth to the point where you almost can't see the line anymore. So be careful not to create too harsh a line in this area of the tooth. If you are enjoying this video, there are dozens more like it waiting for you on my website. You will find complete real-time painting courses where I show every step by step. We explore all the major themes: portraits, the human bodies, landscapes, animals and their textures, and detailed still life. Each demonstration is explained from start to finish so you can follow along easily and progress at your own pace. You will learn to master color mixing, play with light and bring more life to your paintings. So if you want to go further, click on the link in the description and discover all the painting courses. Otherwise, let's get back to this video. So there we go, I would say I've done a good job working on the gums. Now what we can also see is that there are some even lighter areas on these tooth, so those are the ones I am marking, and I will also be adding a few slightly darker touches. That will help the tooth stand out and give it volume and a believable appearance. Even though it's just a small area, if you simply apply one flat color to the tooth, the results won't be convincing or realistic. So that's what I am aiming for here. I have just applied the first few touches on these teeth and they are looking good. So now I'm going to move on to the next tooth. With this one, you can see that the further we move to the left, the darker the teeth become. So for this particular tooth, I am adjusting my base color. It is a bit darker, especially on the upper part and on the left side where we can clearly see the darkest areas. That is exactly what I have tried to reflect in this section. So there you go, a solid application of color, and I will proceed with this tooth in the same way I did with the previous two. On these tooth I've got a good color application. I tried to make sure the colors blended well with one another, and now I am also going to add a few slightly darker touches. You can see that on the right side of the tooth there is a small darker mark like this, which helps bring out the highlight in that area, the bright zone. And on the left side I can also enhance the shading a little bit. I am adding a few small touches like this and it helps make the tooth more believable. As for this tooth as well, I've just worked on the gum. Be careful here too, just because it is a small separate area doesn't mean we shouldn't use a single color or single value. You can notice that there are also slightly darker touches on the gum itself, so they need to be included properly. And now we are moving toward the teeth that are a bit further in the back, and as I mentioned earlier, the further we go to the left, deeper into the mouth, the more the teeth are in shadow since they receive less light. So we'll have to adjust our colors to get the right values. Because even if the value differences between the four teeth we have just painted aren't huge, they are still there. And if we don't take that into account, if we don't apply those subtle value shifts, the result won't be convincing or realistic. And here on this tooth there is a very strong highlight, a large and bright area. So that's what I have added, and now we are moving toward the teeth on the left, which are even darker. So I am adjusting my color and I am using this slightly brownish gray that we can see in this area. Be careful, because even though this tooth is quite dark, it doesn't mean there is one single value. You can see that in the center there is a gray that is a bit lighter, so make sure to take that into account as well. But overall, this tooth isn't necessarily more difficult than the others. Here the gum will also be darker since it is more in shadow as well, so that is something I will be adding next. As I mentioned earlier, the gum area here is going to be even darker, so I am darkening my red by mixing in some burnt umber and ultramarine blue to apply the color in this zone, dark enough to really make everything stand out nicely. I am applying that now, and then we'll move on to the two over teeth in the back, which we will paint in a similar way. We will do those two teeth together. There is also that small area just beneath the teeth, the little part of the tongue that is visible, that we'll paint afterward. And as for the teeth on the right side, the process is exactly the same as what we have done so far, so those will be painted off camera. And we will meet again to paint a bit of the skin around the mouth. So for the teeth, I am continuing in the same way, always taking my time. I know that working on the teeth can be a bit time consuming and somewhat repetitive. We go one tooth at a time, there isn't a really quick way to do it, but it's really important to take your time and be precise. It would be a shame to have poorly rendered teeth as you move forward. It's a bit like looking at someone who has perfect front teeth, and then when they open their mouth, you realize the rest of the teeth don't look good. It would be the same thing here, it would ruin the overall smile. So take your time, work carefully and meticulously, and use a fine brush to get a good result on these teeth. So as I mentioned earlier, the teeth on the right side have been painted. Feel free to pause the video and take your time to do that part as well. Then we can continue working on this mouth by painting beneath the teeth and along the sides. For example, on the right side you can clearly see that it is extremely dark. We are seeing the back of the mouth, which receives very little light, so the colors there are quite dark. I am using this reddish brown color, and I can even darken it a bit more with some ultramarine blue and burnt umber to get something that is really close to the black. So that's what I am going to do right now, mix this new color. Because if you look at the left side beneath the teeth, it's also extremely dark, so that's what I am applying here as well. And so using this fine brush, I try to be extremely precise to paint between the teeth and the lip without spilling over onto the teeth. It will be a shame to ruin all that work. That said, if you do go over the edges a bit, it's not a big deal. You can always repaint over it and fix the mistake. No worries about that. So I am now working under this teeth, and just be careful not to apply the same very dark color everywhere. You will notice that under the central teeth the tones are a bit more reddish, so you need to adjust your color accordingly. These are small color changes, nothing major, but in the end these all make a difference. These make all the difference. That's what gives your painting a truly realistic feel. That's when you look at it and say, yes, that really looks like a believable mouth. I can really recognize this person's mouth. And it's all these small elements, these subtle variations in color that you manage to observe that will make your painting even better. We are getting very close to the end of the mouth now, and if you have made it this far, let me just say, well done. You have stuck with it, paid attention to the details, been patient with the colors and precise with your brushstrokes, and that's exactly what painting is all about. It's not a race, it is a steady process, layer by layer, one careful touch at a time. Now you can really see how every small color variation, every subtle shadow, every careful mark ends up creating something that feels alive. It's no longer just a mouth, it is a mouth that breathes, that exists. So don't stop now, you are almost there, and it's often in these final stages that we refine things, that we push the result from good to truly impressive. So keep that same energy, that same focus, and most of all, enjoy seeing your work come to life, because you are creating something beautiful, so just keep going. Now we are going to work a bit on the skin surrounding the mouth. You'll need to pay close attention to the different values because it's clear that the skin tone isn't uniform. Some areas are definitely darker than others and the hues also vary. Some parts appear slightly more orange while others lean more pinkish. So it is important to be mindful of that. And I am applying my color with a medium-sized brush. I try to gently touch the edge of the lip, but at the same time, if you look closely, the lip doesn't actually have a sharp edge, a sharp border. The mouth and the surrounding skin are quite connected, and there is a kind of soft transition between the two. That's what I am going to work on now. I am laying down my color and then I will try to introduce little bits of the mouth, some reddish pinkish touches that will spill slightly into the skin area. You can clearly see this effect along the upper part of the mouth and a bit on the lower part as well, especially on the right side where you can spot these subtle reddish marks blending into the skin. And that is really important to add. If we draw a mouth with a harsh edge, for instance, if you draw a mouth that has a very sharp, harsh edge without any softness of blending into the skin, it loses credibility and realism. It's a bit like children's drawings where the mouth is outlined with a very dark pencil and the rest is left almost flat or almost white. That sharp contrast ruins the realism. It is the same idea here. If we don't create a smooth transition between the lips and the skin, something will feel off. For example, my result here is already quite good, but it is missing those small elements, those faint touches that overlap slightly to create that natural transition from lip to skin. And so that is going to be my next step, and that's what I am going to add right now. You will see it to come together with these very little strokes, these solid touches placed here and there, and that's how I will make this mouth feel believable and truly connected to the surrounding skin. So that concludes this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and that it was helpful. And if you'd like to take your skills even further, I truly encourage you to join us on the website mentioned in the description. You will get access to all the drawing and painting courses to help you make real progress in your artwork. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very soon in the new video.